When Asha quietly stood up and gave her seat to her mother-in-law at the family event, she thought she was just showing respect. But 10 minutes later, as whispers spread through the hall and everyone's eyes turned to her, her world flipped upside down in a way she never saw coming. And what happened next? It broke her, but also made her rise in a way no one could stop. Asha, a simple and kind woman from Goma Hills, dressed in her best clothes and went to her in-laws' big anniversary celebration. The hall was full of people, family, friends, and important guests. Everyone was laughing and enjoying the event. When Asha arrived, she found a seat in the front row because she was part of the family too. But when her mother-in-law, Mama Jalea, entered the hall, Asha quickly stood up and offered her seat. She thought she was just showing respect, like any good daughter-in-law should. She smiled softly and stepped back, standing quietly while Mama Jalea sat down with pride. At first, Asha didn't notice anything strange, but soon she began to hear small whispers around the hall. People started turning their heads and looking at her, some with pity, some with judgment. The murmurs grew louder, and before Asha could understand what was happening, Mama Jalea stood up and pointed at her. With a loud voice, she told everyone that Asha had given up her seat because she knew she was not worthy to sit with the real family. Mama Jalea called her an outsider, a gold digger who only married into the family for money. The whole hall went silent. All eyes were now on Asha, and she felt her face burn with shame. Her heart pounded. She looked at her husband, Baraka, hoping he would defend her, but he just looked away, pretending not to hear. Asha's smile faded, and her hands began to shake. What she thought was a simple act of respect had turned into public shame. And in that moment, as the whispers turned into laughter, Asha's world started to break in front of everyone. As Asha stood there, her heart was beating so fast she could hardly breathe. Mama Jalea, her mother-in-law, didn't stop with just one insult. She raised her voice even louder so that every single person in the hall could hear. She pointed at Asha and said, "Look at her. She gave up her seat because she knows she doesn't belong here. She knows she is not worthy to sit with us." The room, which was full of laughter a moment ago, suddenly became silent. All the guests turned their heads toward Asha, their eyes filled with judgment and whispers starting to spread like fire. Mama Jalea went on, saying Asha had only married her son to steal from the family. She called her a gold digger, someone who only wanted the family's wealth and name. She came from nothing and now wants to take everything from us, Mama Jalea shouted, her words like knives cutting through Asha's heart. People started nodding, whispering to each other. Some guests even looked at Asha with disgust, believing the lies without question. Asha's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She looked at her husband Baraka, hoping, praying he would finally stand up and tell everyone the truth. But Baraka just sat there, his head down, not saying a word. He didn't even look at her. His silence was louder than anything Mama Jalea had said. It broke Asha more than the cruel words. Her own husband, the man she sacrificed so much for, didn't defend her. He let his mother shame her in front of everyone. The humiliation was deep, and the pain was unbearable. Asha felt like the ground would open and swallow her. The whispers turned into quiet laughter, and she could feel every eye in the hall watching her, judging her, as if she was some criminal. In that painful moment, Asha knew something had changed forever. The family she thought she was part of had thrown her away like she meant nothing, and her husband's silence made it clear she was truly alone. Asha sat alone on the cold kitchen floor, her face buried in her hands as tears poured down like rain. Her heart felt heavy, like it was breaking into 1,000 pieces. In the big hall, she could still hear the sounds of music, laughter, and people clapping. Her husband, Baraka, and his family were celebrating like nothing had happened, like they didn't just tear her apart in front of everyone. No one came to check on her. No one cared. The noise of their happiness felt like knives stabbing deeper into her heart. As she cried, painful memories flashed through her mind. She remembered the day she left her good job just to become a full-time wife because Baraka asked her to. He told her his dreams needed her support, and she believed him. She remembered selling the small piece of land her late father left her, land that was her only inheritance. She sold it without thinking, just to help Baraka start his business. Every step she took was for him, for their future. She gave up her own dreams, her own comfort, her own family, just to stand by him. But now, sitting there in that kitchen, Asha finally saw the truth. All her sacrifices meant nothing to them. To Mama Jalea and the rest of the family, she was nobody, just a shadow, standing in the background while they shined. Her love, her loyalty, her hard work, they didn't see it. They didn't care. They only saw her as an outsider, someone they could use and then throw away. Even Baraka, the man she loved and trusted, had stood silently while his mother called her names. His silence was the deepest cut of all. Asha's tears fell harder as she held her stomach, remembering she was carrying a child, their child. She wondered what kind of life her baby would have if things stayed like this. In that lonely, painful moment, something inside her began to change. The woman who always stayed quiet, who always sacrificed, was starting to feel a new kind of pain, the kind that wakes you up. She wiped her tears slowly, her heart still broken, but somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark of strength began to glow. One evening, as Asha sat quietly outside, staring at the dark sky, thinking about her broken heart and the child growing inside her, someone softly called her name. It was Kito, the young man who worked for the family. He looked around nervously before sitting beside her. His voice was low, but his words were like thunder in Asha's ears. Kito told her that he had seen things that could change everything. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside were papers, real papers, with numbers, names, and signatures. Asha's hands shook as she looked at them. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. The documents showed that Mama Jalea, the same woman who called her a thief, was the real one stealing from the family. Mama Jalea had been secretly moving money into her own accounts, using fake names and lies. And worse, she had blamed Asha to hide her own crimes. Asha's chest felt tight, like she couldn't breathe. All this time, while people pointed fingers at her, called her a gold digger, and looked at her with disgust, Mama Jalea was the one robbing them blind. Kito's eyes were full of pity as he whispered, "I couldn't keep quiet anymore. You don't deserve this." Asha's mind spun in circles. She felt anger, pain, and shock all at once. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. But most of all, she felt trapped. Should she go out there and show everyone the truth? Should she fight back and destroy Mama Jalea's lies? Or should she stay silent, like she always did, and continue to suffer to keep peace? The choice was heavy, but then her hand rested on her belly. She thought about her unborn child, innocent, helpless, and depending on her. Asha knew then that silence was no longer an option. She couldn't let her child grow up in a world where lies win and truth is crushed. That night, as tears rolled down her face again, Asha felt something new rising inside her. Courage. Real courage. And this time, she would not be silent. Early one morning, before the sun even rose, Asha quietly packed her bag. Her hands trembled, but her heart was strong. She looked around the big house in Goma Hills one last time, the house where she had cried so many nights, where she'd been insulted, where her sacrifices were never seen. She wiped her tears, picked up her small bag, and walked out without saying a word to anyone. She was done. She took a long journey back to Lubiri village, where her late father's old home stood. It was small and worn out, but to Asha, it felt like freedom. For the first time in years, she could breathe. With no money but a heart full of determination, Asha decided to start fresh. She remembered how her mother used to weave beautiful fabrics when she was a child. So, she started making her own handmade fabrics using old tools. At first, people in the village laughed at her. They said, "Look at the rich man's wife now, making cloth like a poor woman." Some even mocked her at the market, refusing to buy her work. But Asha didn't stop. Day and night she worked. Her hands sore and her body tired, but her spirit kept going. She told herself, one day they will see. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, people began to notice that Asha's fabrics were different, colorful, unique, and made with love. A tourist passing through the village bought some and shared pictures online. That was when everything changed. A famous fashion house in Kampala saw the photos and became interested. They reached out, wanting to meet the woman behind the beautiful designs. Asha couldn't believe it. After all the pain, the tears, and the sleepless nights, her hard work was finally shining. Her little business that started with mockery was now opening doors she never dreamed of. And deep inside, Asha knew this was just the beginning of her new, powerful story. Asha's life began to change faster than she ever imagined. Her little fabric business, which people once laughed at, suddenly became the talk of the town. Orders started pouring in, not just from nearby villages, but from big cities. Everyone wanted a piece of Asha's unique designs. One day, she got a call that left her speechless. She was invited to showcase her work at an international expo in Nairobi. For a woman who once cried alone in a kitchen, this felt like a dream. She packed her best fabrics, traveled with her head held high, and when she displayed her designs, people from different countries admired her talent. Her name was now known far and wide, and money started flowing in. Asha was no longer the woman they mocked. She was now a rising star. Meanwhile, back at Goma Hills, things were falling apart. Mama Jalia's secret scams had finally come out. The same people who once praised her were now blaming her. The family businesses started failing, debts piled up, and their once grand home felt cold and empty. Baraka, who once stayed silent while his mother insulted Asha, found himself abandoned by everyone, even Mama Jalia, who now only cared about saving herself. With no one left to turn to, Baraka started thinking about Asha again. He remembered how she had stood by him, supported his dreams, and sacrificed everything for their family. Regret filled his heart. He began asking around, trying to find out where Asha had gone. But Asha was no longer the woman who waited for his love. She was busy building her empire, busy turning her pain into power. She had tasted success, and she knew now that she didn't need anyone's approval to shine. As Baraka searched for her, the world watched as Asha's star rose higher, turning her story from one of heartbreak to one of unstoppable victory. The sun was shining bright over Lubiri village as the whole town gathered for the big community event. Everyone was excited, but little did they know they were about to witness something shocking. As Asha stood gracefully at her fabric stall, dressed in her own beautiful designs, whispers started to spread through the crowd. Baraka and Mama Jalia had arrived. They walked in slowly, their faces no longer proud and powerful like before. People watched in silence, waiting to see what would happen next. Baraka, looking tired and worn out, kept his head low. Mama Jalia, the woman who once humiliated Asha in front of everyone, was now the one facing shame. Her businesses had failed, her reputation was ruined, and now she had nowhere else to turn. As they reached Asha, Mama Jalia did something no one expected. She fell to her knees right there in front of the whole crowd. Tears ran down her face as she begged Asha for forgiveness, her voice shaking. "Please, Asha, forgive me," she cried, her once proud voice now weak and desperate. The crowd gasped. This was the same woman who called Asha a gold digger, who pushed her out like she was nothing. And now, here she was, kneeling and begging. But Asha stood tall and calm. She didn't rush to hug them or pretend everything was okay. She simply looked at them, her face strong but kind. She had come too far, worked too hard, and suffered too much to forget everything just like that. People in the village started whispering again, this time with admiration for Asha. They saw how she kept her distance, showing the world that she was no longer the weak woman they once saw. She was successful, independent, and respected. Mama Jalia's status crumbled that day, while Asha's shine only grew brighter. The whole town watched and learned a lesson, that no one should ever underestimate a woman who has found her strength. And as Baraka and his mother stood there in shame, Asha remained the queen of her own story. The whole village held its breath. Everyone thought Asha would finally lash out at Baraka and Mama Jalia after all they did to her. People expected her to shout, to throw their shame back in their faces. But Asha, standing tall and calm, surprised them all. She looked at Baraka, then at Mama Jalia, still kneeling on the ground. Her voice was soft but firm. She said, "I will forgive you, but only on one condition." The crowd leaned in closer, eager to hear her next words. Asha continued, "You must stand before these people, right here, right now, and admit every wrong you did to me. Admit how you lied, how you shamed me, and how you tried to destroy me. And after that, you will sign papers that say you have no claim over my business, my success, or anything I have built with my own hands." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Baraka and Mama Jalia looked at each other, their faces pale. They knew they had no choice. Their power was gone. Their pride was already broken. Slowly, they nodded, Mama Jalia, her voice shaking, confessed to everyone about her lies and greed. Baraka, his head hanging low, admitted how he abandoned Asha when she needed him the most. As the truth spilled out in front of the whole village, people started clapping. Then the claps grew louder until the whole place was filled with cheers. Asha's strength, her calm power, touched everyone's hearts. She had every right to take revenge, but instead, she chose justice with dignity. When they signed the papers, giving up any right to her growing fashion empire, the crowd rose to their feet, giving Asha a standing ovation. She smiled, not with pride, but with peace. She had won, not just in business, but in respect and honor. That day, Asha showed the world that true power is not in shouting or fighting. It is in standing tall and making wise, strong decisions. And the whole village would never forget that moment. Asha returned to Goma Hills, but this time, she was not the same woman who once cried in silence. She was no longer the broken daughter-in-law that everyone mocked. Now, people stood up when they saw her coming. Children waved at her with smiles, and shopkeepers rushed to greet her. Asha had become the biggest employer in the whole region, running factories and workshops that gave hundreds of people jobs. She was also a powerful influencer, with her name known even in cities far away. Everyone wanted to be part of her success story. Mama Jalia, who once ruled the family with fear and pride, was no longer the woman people trembled before. She now worked quietly in a small community kitchen that Asha's foundation had built. The same hands that once pointed fingers and shamed Asha were now busy serving food to the poor. People whispered about how life had turned around. The mighty Mama Jalia now humbled, while Asha stood tall and shining. Baraka lived quietly in the background. He was no longer the proud husband who once let his mother destroy his marriage. Now, he walked with his head low, avoiding the eyes of people who used to praise him. Deep inside, he felt ashamed of what he had done. But there was also a secret part of him that couldn't help but feel proud when he heard people talk about Asha's rise. She had done what no one believed possible. Everywhere Asha went, people showed her respect. No one dared to speak badly about her anymore. She had become untouchable, not because of revenge, but because she built herself up with hard work and dignity. The woman they once pushed aside was now the pillar of the community. Goma Hills would never be the same again, and everyone knew it. This was the era of the new Asha. At the Grand Women's Empowerment Summit, the hall was filled with applause as Asha walked onto the stage. This time, there was no shame, no whispers, no mocking eyes, only love and respect. In the center of the stage stood a beautiful golden chair shining under the lights. It wasn't just any chair, it was a symbol of the seat Asha once gave up at her in-laws' event, the very act that led to her public humiliation. But today, that same act had turned into her greatest victory. As she walked to the golden chair, Asha held her little child close to her heart. Tears glistened in her eyes, but they were tears of joy and pride. She gently sat on the chair, and the entire room stood up, cheering for her strength and her journey. The once humble woman from Goma Hills was now an icon, inspiring women from all over the country to rise and never let anyone make them feel small. With a bright smile, Asha looked around the hall, at the women who saw her as a hero, at her child who would grow up knowing their mother never gave up. And then she spoke the words that touched every heart in the room. Her voice was strong and steady as she said, "I gave up my seat once, never again." The crowd erupted in applause, some people even crying, because they knew her pain, her struggle, and now her triumph. Asha's journey had come full circle. She had reclaimed not just a seat, but her worth, her power, and her voice. And this time, no one could take it away from her. The story ended with her sitting tall on that golden chair, a queen in her own right, and a promise that she would never shrink herself again for anyone's comfort.